Hi, my name is Matthew Phillips. This is the Structures, Purposes, and Procedures module from the Corporate Learning course. A couple of brief words about me. I've been a member of the North Carolina Wing for more than 10 years. I started in the Winston-Salem Composite Squadron and then served for a while in the Sugar Valley Composite Squadron. I've been the Wing's legal officer, chief of staff, legislative squadron commander, and now I'm the commander of Group 4. In CAP's larger structure, I'm also the legal officer for the Mid-Atlantic region, and I'm the Deputy Chief of the Legal Officer Corps on the National Staff. So that means that I've seen a lot of parts of the Civil Air Patrol structure, and I'm glad to tell you a little bit about that today. Our objectives are to define the corporate structure, to understand the way CAP fits together, and discuss in particular the structure of CAP's leadership, the way decisions are made and direction is set for the Civil Air Patrol. I also want to talk about the purpose of each part of CAP's leadership. The structures that we have in place are not there just because that seemed like the right thing to do, but because each has a specific purpose to serve. A couple of definitions as we begin this work. The idea of structure is we want to see who we are and how we present ourselves to our partners and our communities, and even ourselves. Sometimes structure seems like a thing that we don't really need to worry about because that's someone else's thing up the chain, but it's an important part of the way CAP presents itself. Our structure is what enables us to partner with much broader organizations like the Air National Guard in North Carolina and many other wings, as well as, of course, the Air Force and other national organizations like the Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association or the Experimental Aircraft Association or Boy Scouts of America, all organizations that we have had some form of partnership with in the past. Purpose is what drives us to volunteer our time and efforts. And just as every member of a squadron has a sense of purpose in CAP, there's a purpose behind each part of our leadership structure, so that they have a reason to get up as well, but also so that they know how to do their jobs and support the total membership in the best ways. Procedure is a big part of CAP. It's the discipline, the regulations that allow us to achieve our aggressive goals. You can't do the kinds of things that CAP sets out to do without some discipline and some order, and that's what our procedure helps us to do. Now, this chart is the one thing that I picked up intact from the national curriculum to present to you, because to be totally frank, it's really hard to make a chart that looks like this because our structure is a little strange. Let me point out the things that I want you to understand. There is a structure for CAP, and there is a roughly parallel structure for the Air Force. So the headquarters of the United States Air Force designates members and procedures for the Board of Governors of CAP. We have a National Executive Officer who corresponds with the commander of CAP USAF, whose office is also at Maxwell Air Force Base, actually in the same building. And then we have regions that have a CAP USAF equivalent, a liaison region office. Under the regions, of course, we have wings, groups, squadrons, and in some cases flights. And under the national commander and his chief operating officer, we have the national staff who help support and suggest programming for the rest of CAP. Don't worry too much about this chart if it's confusing to you. I think it's a helpful reference, and certainly you can go and find it in the curriculum yourself if you want to look at it and review it a little bit longer. But I think what's much more important is to dive into the parts of this puzzle, and we'll start with the Board of Governors. If you're part of, if you have a job at a company, or you're in a school, or you work for another organization, think of the Board of Governors as much like the Board of Directors, the policy-setting legal authority at the top of our organizational structure. It was established in 2001 by the Secretary of the Air Force in a way that actually gave us a little bit more independence as an organization than we'd had before. It comprises 11 members. 4 members are appointed by the Secretary of the Air Force and often are retired Air Force officers. 4 members are appointed by Civil Air Patrol. The Board of Governors elects its own set of CAP representatives. Those are often former wing commanders or other people who have had leadership and broad experience in the organization. And then we have 3 members representing interested organizations. These might be private organizations like King Schools. One of the founders of King Schools is currently on the Board of Governors. They might be organizations like AOPA or maybe even the FAA at some point, although we don't have an FAA representative right now. The Board of Governors must meet at least 3 times a year. It generally meets a little more often than that. It's in charge of long-range planning, management of our structure, and oversight of our key leadership. They hire our national commander and the chief operating officer, so they're doing oversight of our key leaders there. The CAP Senior Advisory Group, which you might hear referred to as CSAG, is the National Command Staff and the Region Commanders. This is the group that is the primary advisory group for the National Commander. If you're familiar with the way a school works, you might think of this like the Board of Visitors or the Board of Advisors. They recommend policy. They propose constitution and bylaw changes to the Board of Governors. They're really the sort of cabinet that the National Commander uses in his decisions about the organization. So again, it's made up of the National Commander, the Vice Commander, and the Executive Officer, all of whom are uniformed volunteer members. And then the Region Commanders. I listed the 8 Civil Air Patrol regions there for you, just so you'd have them to think about. The CAP USAF Commander and CAP's Chief Operating Officer, who's currently John Salvador, also sit on this group. They are non-voting members, but certainly play an active role in the group nonetheless. If you think about that senior advisory group and then open it one more level, you get to the CAP Command Council. So if you notice here, a lot of these blocks are the same. We have the same National Command Staff, the same region commanders, the same non-voting members, but we add in the wing commanders. So this is a group that meets a few times a year. They advise the National Commander on operational issues where we really need the wing commander's wisdom about what's going on the ground, not so much policy issues as operational concerns. The CAP Command Council meets at the annual conference, at the Winter Command Council meeting, and usually one other time during the year. So our representative, our primary representative there, of course, is the wing commander. CAP USAF is this sort of parallel structure that I mentioned before. CAP USAF is an active duty unit of the United States Air Force. It used to be part of Air Education Training and Command. That's why we're located at Maxwell Air Force Base, which is the headquarters for AATC, and is now part of 1st Air Force. So it moved to the Air Combatant Command. It's part of the sort of line fighting Air Force now, rather than being part of the training unit. CAP USAF is staffed by active duty and a few reserve Air Force personnel, as well as some civilian personnel. So they have a commander, he's pictured right there. They have a vice commander and then staff directorates. The ones that I've noticed members tend to interact with or maybe are part of situations where CAP USAF staff are included in are legal, training and education, so our professional development and emergency services training work, and safety. So CAP USAF's structures there mirror our own. CAP USAF is really providing Air Force support and liaison services. You might have heard one of the reasons we often have to call CAP USAF from the wing level is if we're doing some exercise or trying to get an orientation ride at an Air Force base. CAP USAF helps coordinate that. They also provide oversight of CAP with regard to federal funds and resources. So we want to be sure, since we spend a lot of Air Force money out of Civil Air Patrol, the Air Force monitors that through CAP USAF. They also provide advice and assistance to CAP regions and wings. They are there as an operational source of support. We have a CAP USAF civilian staff member who sits in the Burlington Wing Headquarters office and is often available to provide support and ideas to our leadership. So great resource for us. CAP National Headquarters, which also, as I said before, is the location of CAP USAF. In fact, if you look here on the picture of the front of the building, you can see the top of the building says National Headquarters Civil Air Patrol and Headquarters CAP USAF. When you go in the building, if you sort of turn to the left on the first floor is CAP USAF, and to the right are most of the staff offices for the Civil Air Patrol. CAP National Headquarters is led on a day-to-day basis by the Chief Operating Officer, Mr. John Salvador, who's a retired Air Force pilot. He is hired by the Board of Governors in consultation with the National Commander, and he serves as a permanent staff member. He's not on a term the way the Commander and Vice Commander are, but rather serves as a permanent employee. There are paid staff at National Headquarters, as well as volunteer or uniformed staff who are referred to together as the National Staff. One of the things that General Carr began and General Smith has really encouraged is that the National Staff be referred to as one staff, not as used to be the case, the sort of paid staff and the volunteer staff. We work together. And that's certainly true for me. I'm part of the National Legal Staff. I work on a probably weekly basis with our General Counsel, Rafi Robles, and the National Paralegal, Becky Lee, as well as the Contract Administrator in that office, all of whom are paid staff. There are 3 uniformed members of the National Legal Staff, and we work with them on a regular basis in order to support the membership. So those paid employees are typically specialists in professional fields. I already mentioned the General Counsel. We have financial management staff, philanthropy and fundraising, logistics, education, member services, and of course, operations. The volunteer staff, the uniformed staff who are on that national group, offer perspective as well as valuable training and experience. Now we get to the unit that's probably the most familiar to each of us, the Cap Wings. This first bullet item actually comes out of the national curriculum for CLC, and I think it's just a little bit controversial. Cap Wings are referred to as the primary operational unit of the organization. I think I might say that they're the primary organizational unit. They are the organizational unit around which much of the rest of CAP is built. I would have said before I looked at this material that the squadrons were the primary operational unit of the organization. So I tried to think about that a little bit, and I came to a sort of compromise view that maybe we could share together, and that is that squadrons train and develop and support airmen who then work together in missions which are typically organized at the wing level. We have some squadron level missions, but more often when we are tasked to do something by the Air Force or the State Emergency Management Office, we receive that tasking and staff it as a wing. So I think that's the sense in which the primary operational unit of the organization language came up. Cap Wings ensure that the missions of CAP are carried out and that regulations are effectively followed. Part of CLC is seeing yourself as a part of the wing structure. The reason it's called Corporate Learning Course is that the wing used to be the primary corporate structure. The wing commander was the corporate officer for CAP in each state. Actually, the wing commander is no longer a corporate officer. That changed about 6 years ago. But we still call this the Corporate Learning Course because in CLC you're coming together and training as part of this bigger corporate structure. And that's why this unit is important to the CLC training. If you have more questions about CAP structure, purposes, and procedures, I hope you'll feel free to look me up and give me a call. My email is matthew.phillips@ncwgcap.org. You can find me through Office 365. I feel like I'm at almost every meeting we have, so you can find me at one of those. But also, feel free and encouraged, in fact, to go to the website under the Members section. Look up our publications. Look up the About information. Read about the people who are serving as commander and vice commander, the people who are on the Board of Governors. Some really interesting stories there, and certainly worth your time and exploration. Thanks for doing CLC. Thank you for being committed to your professional development in CAP and for being willing to take some of the time that you have invested in CAP and begin to direct it towards supporting not only the wings, but also the broader structures of CAP. Thank you.